All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Advocacy Prime's ICEC edition here as we are at the convention. I am having the pleasure of having my fifth guest for our fifth episode here. His name is Mr. Kevin Jones, and he is, currently is very, very passionate about restorative practices, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. He has his master's in restorative practices and his master's in educational leadership. Kevin, how are we doing today, man?
Doing really well, Mike.
Awesome. Like I said, it's a pleasure to have you here. You know, you currently work right now at the Regional Office of Education, number 17, which is, for reference for our listeners out there, it is in the, right central Illinois area. Right. Very cool. And, you work as a restorative practice trainer and coach and consultant. And that's awesome. And you're also an adjunct professor and trainer and coach. So is there anything that you don't do?
Yeah. I'm a retired alternative school administrator. So once I retired, I started doing this work for my second career. So
I would love to talk to you about, alternative schools. Let's, towards the end there, I'll kind of make a little mental note. All right, Kevin. Awesome. So, can you also tell me, are you working for Columbia University currently right now?
Yes, I'll do the first summer with them this coming summer.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm going to do an adjunct professor working with their soon-to-be education administrators in this 2-month process teaching restorative practices.
Nice. So what brings you to ICEC?
Well, actually, Billy, who's part of the board, he's friends with people that I know. Yeah. And I started out at the Baby Folk. Yeah. So I have a lot of history. Billy worked at Hammond School, and I started out at the Baby Folk in 1985. So I still have a lot of people there that I'm close to. And Billy was kind of organizing this, and like I said, I've been doing so much work around the country in restorative practices. And
so cool, man.
He invited me through somebody else. So
wow.
I put it on my schedule. I think it was about a year ago. So I just put it on the schedule, and I'm here. So
wow. Yeah. Well, ICC appreciates you having you here. Because we, again, the diversity of topics. It's been a long day. I'm like losing all my words. The diversity of topics is very important at conferences like this, right? Because, even like with. I was just talking with Stephanie Yeager about how that, last year our keynote was about mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
And so we're able to come to these types of conferences and get perspectives and tips and tools on how to refresh ourselves and make us, more mindful and, yes. and all that. And then we get to some really cool things like restorative practices. And restorative practice is a big, key word right now. But you just kind of alluded to, you've been all over the country. I'm extremely interested to hear about that. What are you doing over the country?
Okay, yeah, well, I do everything from, I train on intro to restorative practices. I train on restorative conferences, which restorative conferences more in line with restorative justice. It's responsive to an incident. Yeah. Restorative practices. Restorative justice is part of it, but it's only 20%. The 80% is that intentional engagement with every human you come in contact with. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but the number one reason is you have impact on everybody you come in contact with. So it's being intentional on how we impact those people. Yeah. And so restorative practices is kind of a leadership model. Yeah. It is a mindset. It starts with the mindset, and it's called a social discipline window. And it's how you treat people you have authority and or influence over. So whether that's a student, whether that's somebody in social service, but it's also how leaders treat people they have authority over. So it's how managers and organizational leaders treat their staff. The goal is, how do you do stuff with them? And the way you do stuff with people, you balance the accountability with support. What supports do people need to do the things you want them to do? Then there's a second part of it is called fair process, and it includes like 3 E's is what it's called, is engagement, is explanation. The why and why not piece.
So I want to go back to real fast to restorative justice, because when I of course I know both of these terms here, but I love restorative justice because I just want to make sure, because I love doing these because I learn, and like you're teaching me, and we're going to be teaching our audience. So is this your book?
Yeah, that's not mine, but that's the intro book. I'm gonna leave that with you, so you'll have some content.
Oh man, I appreciate it. It's a library. Thanks, dude. Wow, it's so kind of you. In Restorative Practices Handbook for Teachers, Disciplinarians, and Administrators, the second edition, written by Casatello, Watchell, and Watchell. I see a lot of those guys on the research.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine now.
God, dude, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So when I look at restorative justice, right, I look into, where, and I relate it to my job right now, and so let's make a quick example. A student knocks over a, pencil shavings on the ground, laughs at it. You make them clean it up. You make them throw it away. Restorative justice, right? I mean, that's just them doing what they did, being accountable for what they did, and hopefully learning from that. Now, you said that's 20%.
Yes.
And then we look at restorative practices. So what is this 100% of? Just restorative?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I'll tell you is, and like I said, there's 4 explicit practices, and these practices came way before all the research. The research just validated why this works. It's what good coaches, good parents, good teachers have been doing forever.
Wow.
But it became a social science that studies human relationships and connections, and how important it is for people to feel connected.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work is front-loaded with, it starts with mindset, and then it goes to understanding yourself and other people, that human piece, and then you get to how does this look in real time.
Wow.
So there's a restorative practice continuum. It starts with the language, effective language, being intentional about using effective language. One, the first reason you use effective language is to set boundaries with people. Let people know what you think and feel about everything.
So can you give me an example of that? How can I be intentional about that?
Intentional. First of all, I'm going to engage with you listening, head and heart.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to be intentional about getting to know you.
Yeah.
And so I can know your story, so I can know what's the story behind the story. So that's kind of that first piece. But the intentional language I'm going to use is effective language. And what that means is I use it for 3 reasons. One is just to set boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not okay with that. That's not okay in my space.
And is this very environmental, situational, where, okay, you and I just met, you're gonna know what kind of language we can use with each other, and then you're with your buddies. That's total different.
Right.
I got a little quick thing.
Yeah.
So there's these grasshoppers that are out in northern Africa.
Yeah.
And once the grasslands begin to rise because there's so much water comes in, and they're like the most friendliest grasshoppers.
Right.
All of a sudden, once this event happens, their cells in their body all of a sudden turn them into locusts, and then they start becoming really furious and going at each other and eating each other. And it's just kind of this example of that we are so different in environments. It's kind of like a passive thought.
Right.
Right? We just met. I know how I'm going to talk to you, but I'm going to go to work. I'm going to still keep that professional, and then now I go home to my wife, and now my language is more relaxed.
Right.
Is this kind of part of that holistic approach?
It's definitely a holistic approach, and what I love about restorative practice, I could talk about this for hours. I really could.
I'm sure.
But the language, the things you learn in restorative practice, you can use it at work, and because it becomes a part of how you engage with every human being you come in contact with, especially those you have authority and influence over. It's just effective language. That's the 20% of the work, mastering that language. I worked with some teachers in Peoria early August, and one of the things that the 7th grade team took away, they spent the first 2 weeks teaching their students effective language. And modeling that for their students, because that prevents a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
For example, you say something to me that I don't like. Instead of me ignoring it, I'm intentional to let you know that I'm okay with it or I'm not. So we're creating that honest communication from day one.
Yeah.
It prevents a lot of conflict.
Yeah.
We teach that language to our students. We intentionally use it, and we use it with each other, because a lot of the issues that impact schools, and I've seen it in schools, I've seen it in social service, is how adults treat themselves and how they treat each other.
And if you don't establish those boundaries, it can become very internal.
Exactly. And then because the other reason for effective language is just to give feedback. I don't agree, as opposed to your ideal sucks. I mean, it's simple stuff.
Right.
And then the other one is the number one reason: teach empathy. You need to know how your behavior impacts me, good or bad.
Yeah.
And so some teachers when I do trainings, are a little uncomfortable with that in the beginning, because they're like, I'm not going to tell kids how I feel. But this is not sharing your personal life with the kids. So you still have boundaries. But it is saying to a kid, I feel disrespected when you talk to me that way.
Yeah.
It's not okay. But it's also saying, man, I am so proud of the work you're doing. Or it's saying, you weren't at school last week. I'm worried. I used to tell my kids at Alt Ed all the time, because my kids, they were doing some pretty risky stuff in the community. And I would say, hey, I'm hearing some stuff going on out there, dude. I'm worried. I'm not telling them you're bad for doing that or judging them. Right. I'm telling you, when I hear this stuff, it upsets me.
It makes you more approachable.
Exactly. It humanizes you. I do a lot of work with law enforcement,
this is all making
too.
sense, dude.
Yeah, I do a lot of work with law enforcement and court services, because it is. It's like it humanizes, and this is what the restorative process does. It humanizes us. It doesn't take away our authority. You're still a boss. You're still a teacher, but you're human. They need to know, kids need to know, that when you go home and you spend hours grading papers and trying to prepare the best lesson for them, when you walk in and they're not doing it or they're talking about it, it upsets you as a person.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the first piece. And then there are some restorative questions, and I think I might have another restorative question card I'll give you.
Yeah.
Because that's the second thing, and that's these questions. They're arranged in past, present, future. What happened? Thoughts and feelings about what happened. Impact of what happened. What do you need to make it right?
A reflection piece.
It's complete reflection. It keeps us from coaching and preaching. It gives the person you're talking to the space to reflect on what they're truly thinking, what they're truly feeling, how they're impacted by something, how they impact other people, and what they need to do to fix it. They're coming up with the answers, and it's a powerful process. Yeah. And then you get into more structured things like the circles and the harm. When harm is caused, that's when we get into the restorative justice. How do we repair that harm so we can go back to a positive relationship? And so a lot of times, like you said, people just let that stuff build up, and they never repair it, and so it's just there.
Do you think that's like a point where it is irreparable, or do you believe that there are relationships that are irreparable?
There are relationships that both people agree, I never want to be in the same space with you again.
Yeah.
But they process that. They get to that point. I mean, I've done a lot
but that's still a relationship, right?
Exactly. We agree. Like I had two girls, I'll never forget. Two girls 3 years ago now. My last year at Alternative Ed. They were going to fight. Two teenage girls. So I de-escalate the situation, separate the girls, de-escalate it, talk to both of them. I have a great relationship with both girls. I said to them, when I talk to them individually, I use those questions. What do you need to do to make it right? And both girls independently told me, Mr. Jones, you put us in the same room together, we're going to beat the blank out of each other.
Yeah.
And so I said, I appreciate you being honest. Today I'm going to keep you apart. But this is not sustainable. I'm going to meet with you first thing in the morning when you get off the bus. I'm going to talk to both of you again. My goal is to get you to, it's important to me that we get this worked out. Both of them agreed to meet it to work it out. They agreed to get together to work it out. But both of them said, we won't be friends. And I said, I'm not telling you to be friends. Yeah. But I just want to make sure we walk away with an understanding that this is the expectation we're going to have. But it ended up going really well. And we actually did made a restorative poster, an artifact together. And the girls connected. I mean, they never became best friends, but they never had any more issues with each other. This process is really, really impactful. It's really impactful. Restorative justice started in the criminal justice system, and the number one focus was to give a voice to the person that was harmed. So that's why sometimes I get frustrated when schools think this is a behavior mod process. It is not.
Yeah.
This is giving a voice to the person who was harmed, and that could be a school. A kid did something to upset your school. Your school was harmed. The process is to give that kid a chance to make things right with your school. The consequences, they're secondary to the restorative process. I've done a lot of restorative conferences over the last 3 years.
You are so interesting, insanely. You are an expert, man. I mean, it makes me like when I see people like you and like who know like this stuff so well. It reminds me of my professors, and I just want to see them in action. Like, I would love to see you in action. I could just hear from your language that you just have this understanding of it and an understanding of how to talk to people that are in crisis.
Yeah. What I'll tell you,
which is hard because you could be reactive, and we want to be proactive.
Right. But see, here's the thing. The one question I ask at every training, I tell people to stand up if they rock at their job. And then I get the whole crowd to stand up.
Yeah.
And then I say, remain standing if you can tell me how to do everything 100% like you. So a few people remain standing and they tell me. But then I say that was a trick question because you can't, because it's implicit. It's what you know.
Right.
What restorative practices does is take all that stuff you know, it gives you a place to put it, and it's in this nice framework so we can all do it the same. That's why it changes schools' culture and climate, because we're doing the same thing within it. So we're using the same language. We're sitting down doing the one-on-ones, not just send it to the principal, send it to the assistant principal, send the kid to the teacher that is really good with kids. This is a process that everybody can do. So it's easier to build capacity.
How much does restorative practices rely on, behavior analysis? Like, right, like you're trying to understand the function of someone's behavior, and they rip a pencil sharpener off the wall, and what do they want to do? They want to get attention from their classmates, or they want to escape.
Right. Story behind the story. And most of the stuff that I learned in restorative practices is stuff I learned when I worked in 1985 as a child care worker at the Baby Fold in Norman, Illinois. It's a lot of the training is, like I said, it is what I love so much about it. It is like people talk about something else on your plate. Picture this as your plate, your toolbox. It's where you put everything you already know. So just like what you're talking about, the behavior analysis. Behavior mod, everything fits within this framework. First of all, how do you work with the person?
Yeah.
Is it fair? Do you understand the story behind the story? Do I understand what your triggers are? Do I understand what my triggers are?
Right.
How can I self-regulate? How do I help you self-regulate? So it's understanding yourself and other people, and the continuum is how we intentionally engage all the time. Effective language, restorative questions, sit down for those one-on-one, taking the time for those one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
Community building circles, conflict circles when bad things happen that involve a lot of people. And then conferences looks more like a court setting. It's a more involved process that most schools, the conferences should not be something they're doing more than 6 or 7 times a year.
Yeah.
The conflict circles, the difference between conflict circles and conferences are conflict circles, both parties did harm to each other and both parties were harmed. A conflict, it's clear that one person did harm to the other person. That person agrees to make it right. The person that was harmed agrees to participate. If I did something to harm you, this process allows for me to be humanized. There's reintegrative shame, so I become ashamed of what I did to you, and I want to make it right by not doing it to you. Stigmatizing shame is what we do a lot of.
Yep.
You are the worst thing you've ever done. And so that's that stigmatizing piece. And in my trainings, I always share out this African proverb, and it says, any child not embraced by the community will burn it down to feel the warmth.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder, don't stick. We're all capable of doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
but we should be ashamed of what we did, but we should have a way to come back to the community. And that's the restorative justice, is bring that person back to the community.
Gotcha.
And not labeling them. Instead of you're the bad kid, again, we know this in special education. That's what I mean. This is not new stuff.
Right.
I learned this in special ed and mental health. Separate the door from the deed. I'm gonna address the behavior, but I'm never gonna devalue you. Right. And we're gonna give you opportunities to change that all the time. So that's what's powerful about it. It is not new. It's a new social science because the research is based on studying what's worked.
Well, I mean, when you talk about the stigmas, right, and that has historically been going on since the beginning of humanity, right? And just like war, it's never going to go away.
Right.
It never ever will. No matter how much, no matter how many, you can go to every single door of everybody in America, and you can go teach restorative practices to them, and I mean, it just we accept that, right? We understand that,
right?
But I think that giving people those tools and especially adjusting to the new times. Right. Where we have social media and we have to understand those repercussions for that. And that we also need to be cognizant of that we are kind of inadvertently causing conflicts behind a screen.
Right.
And so have you found a time in which restorative practices were ineffective? Because I know it's been very effective for you, but I mean, what's an example?
Well, a common thread is, and like I say, that's why it's not doing restorative to people, and that's what people get confused, like it's a tool.
Right.
I'm gonna give you a long answer, but try to make it as short as possible.
We got all the time you want, man.
The RAND report, which did the most intensive research about restorative practices, the area that it was top notch, it improved culture and climate right away. It reduced suspensions and expulsion. So it had a huge impact on the school to prison pipeline. So it really impacted suspension and expulsions for minority students. The area that it has the least amount of impact, at least in the RAND report, was junior high on repeat behaviors. People repeat behavior, especially junior high. So, but the process allows you, because what you're just talking about, that what it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Number one reason people change behavior is because how it impacts other people. So that's why all this process is so important. There are people who are pathological. There are people who have personality disorders. But that's where fair process comes in. Fair process means I'm going to give you a voice. I'm going to tell you what can happen, what can't happen. And when we end this interaction, you're going to know what's expected. I've told kids what I thought and felt before, and they said, Mr. Jones, I don't give a blank what you think and feel. And my response was, can't make you care about what I think and feel, but this is what's going to happen afterwards. That's fair. There are consequences that come with behavior.
Yeah.
The goal is to get the behavior to not repeat, and this has a really high, I think it's like 85% success if you go engage in restorative practices and you really engage in it, because a lot of people, there's some automatic pushback from some people, like, oh, here's something new, and so they don't really engage in it. And then it's, oh, it didn't work. And then always, when I've had people say that to me, I'll say, how many do you use effective language? Well, no, I talk the way I talk. Do you ever sit down and have a conversation with a kid using a restorative question card? Well, I'm teaching. How many circles do you do? Well, none. You're not engaging in restorative practice.
Yeah, right now.
And so yeah, anything, there's always going to be people who are not willing to change, not able to change, need more support. But for the masses,
how do you accept that? And how do you get people to accept that?
Fair process. Again, it's fair process. Example. And this is, to me, it was the same mentality in behavior mod.
Yeah.
When, the first, in behavior mod, the first thing was to stop the behavior, especially if it was dangerous in any way. And then we process afterwards with the goal of what tools can we provide for the young person so they can stop repeating that same behavior. But if we just rely on stopping the behavior, that's not good enough. That's not sustainable. We do stuff to people. The goal is to work with them. How can I help you meet my expectations? whether that's safety, whether it's how we talk to each other. What supports do you need to meet the expectations that I have? And if at some point we can't, then, that's another conversation,
Yeah.
So.
You mind just going like this to your mic real fast? Just right to the bottom here. Just plugging in, just making sure that bad boy's all the way in there. There you go. Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's like, and if you don't follow that process, and if you're missing those puzzle pieces out of there, you're not practicing restorative practices.
No, exactly. That's what the social discipline one. That's the mindset one. It's a box. It's a box, but it's a box version of the hypothesis. The hypothesis of restorative practices is people are more willing to change behavior if those with authority and or influence over them do stuff with them as opposed to them, for them, or being neglectful of them. To work with somebody, first I need to know what supports you need to meet my expectations, whether you're a student or you're my employee. If I only tell you what to do, if I only punish you...
For whose benefit is this for?
Right. Yeah.
Am I doing this because of my benefit, or, well, I should be for yours?
Exactly. If I just do stuff to you, if I punish you, I cannot punish away your behavior.
Right.
It's not sustainable.
Right.
Eventually, you're going to run away. Eventually, you're going to retaliate.
Not going to be around that person.
Exactly. But if I do everything for you, I'm doing harm too, because I'm not teaching you anything. If I give you everything and I do everything for you, I'm not teaching you anything.
Nothing to restore.
Exactly. So if I do both of those together, that's when mindset I'm being restorative. So it starts there. And then it goes to, am I being fair? Am I understanding myself and other people? Because if you see that you can do behavior mod through a restorative lens. It's the restorative lens that's the most important.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of these practices are familiar to me because they're very similar to what I did in residential and very similar that I took from residential to alt ed. My goal at alt ed was to create a positive, safe learning environment. I got that from residential. Safety first, positive environment. Safe from emotional and physical harm, and that meant everybody in the environment, including adults. That was my charge, and that's what made me successful at alt ed. I was able to take that process, put programming in place that it was very safe and very positive.
I think I can relate to you on a significant amount of levels because you obviously are very good at what you do, and you were very good at following through with the process of restorative practices as an actual practitioner.
Right.
And now, you leave that to go coach other people to take those talents and out there when your heart is it's kind of like me because obviously one day I want to be a professor, but I love what I do and I try to tell myself I go to what I do with my kids, but I mean why would I want to leave that if I'm doing really good with that and they're going to be losing somebody, people say that we're going to be losing a good teacher like that, but I feel like that there's a higher calling to go and try to teach my vision and passions into and instill them in future educators. Exactly. So that hopefully it's infectious like that. And that is exactly what you're doing, right?
That's why I do what I do, honestly, because the whole thing, I never intended to leave my position. But what I came across it was a couple things I had to reflect. It's this thing that we talk about in restorative practices and about stilling conflict. And people who are good with working with kids and families, we still conflict. We don't allow those other people to grow.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, whether we leave at 25, 35, 45, 55, eventually we're going to go.
Yeah. So
putting systems in place, something that everybody can do, is going to have a bigger impact no matter how good one person is. So yeah, my joy, my energy comes from traveling the country and sharing the things that I could do in one space with as many educators as possible and as many administrators as possible, because if administrators are not being restorative with their teachers, it's going to be hard for them to get the teachers to be restorative.
Dude, that you couldn't say that any better. Mm-hmm. It's not just for teachers and It's for everybody.
It's for everybody. Every human you come in contact with. It starts with listening to people speaking, head and heart. So you're really engaged.
Well, and you have to realize, too, is that in the environment, I'm very lucky to be at the school district that I'm at right now, because these administrators there recognize you as, you and I, we're people.
Right, exactly.
Right? You know, we're a person, and you have more education than me, but that doesn't make you any more better than me, right?
Not even close.
We're on the same page, bro. We're on the same level, and it's like,
it's funny you say that, because I started really experiencing it. Well, my first experience with that was actually 7 years ago. I went to Milwaukee to do the Danielson training.
Nice.
And it was cool. She couldn't fix it. She couldn't get her mic to work. So here I am standing next to Charlotte Danielson, and I'm fixing a mic. We take a picture together. And so that was kind of that first one of those things. But then when I started taking classes at IR, the International Institute for Restorative Practice, they have, in the summertime, you can go down there and do all your face-to-face. So I was down there like a month. The people I met from around the world who are doing incredible things. And we're sitting in a circle together. That was so empowering and so humbling. It's like, it's human to human. It doesn't matter what your credentials are. That's why when you say expert, like, if you notice, I kind of cringe, because I hate that word.
Right.
I've done 1,000 trainings now, and I learn every time I do a training. I'm always reflecting. I'm a student of this work.
Well, I want to use, and I use that word as in, like, hey, you're somebody that you would want to go to learn more about that.
Yeah.
And I bet you, because in going back to the very first beginning part of one of your primary essentials to restorative practices that I bet you everybody in that circle there listened to you.
Exactly. Head and heart.
You can't listen
to every I love when you said right away, when you talked about, when you were telling me your story about giving kids voice. That it starts with that. That's the engagement part. Giving a voice to every human being you come in contact with, whether it's a bum on the street or whether it's a corporate head. And what's been cool for me is when I see corporate heads, I've never been starstruck, but now it's such a humanizing process.
Yeah.
Roles and authority doesn't change, but at the end of the day, it's a human piece.
Yeah.
And
it's crazy, man.
It's crazy, but it's so enlightening and it's so real. And
I wonder, like, what, trying to look at, like, the original foundations of, you bring up Starstruck, and, like, all of a sudden Matthew McConaughey walks right through here, and what? You think about the foundations of what started that, and maybe it's just because I've seen you on the TV screen, I enjoyed you, and now, like, that's always make me long to meet you, but, like,
right.
I wonder if that, like, we didn't have any of those, like, movies or, like, abilities to look up to somebody.
Yeah.
But it's like it's needed, but it's at the same time, you walk in here, Matthew, we're the same guy,
Exactly. Yeah, he just made movies and making a lot of money, but he's still, at the end of the day, it's the him. And that's why, again,
when you're pretty moral or immoral, or not moral, but what's the word I'm looking for? But when you're dead,
Yeah, at the end of, you're right. At the end of the day.
Yeah.
And that is cool. And I think it takes some of the pressure off of it, because one thing that happens in restorative practice, I'll tell you the aim of restorative practice. It's a short sentence, but it's something to remember. First thing in aim of restorative practice, and it will be in the book, it is to develop community. Because once you develop community, you manage conflict. So develop community, manage conflicts. The tensions in the room, because we're relating, there's less tension. So we're going to have less stuff going on because we're reducing tension, because I know your boundaries.
Yeah.
I know how my stuff impact you. And I don't want to do harm to you.
Right.
And then, because we're human, we do unintentional harm sometimes, and sometimes we do intentional harm. But this process allows us to repair that harm so we can go back to restoring the relationship. You build a relationship, because most people who are really, really good with tough population, if you ask them why, the first thing they're going to say, because I have a relationship with that kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Rapport. The most important thing in the world, man.
Yeah. When I first started training restorative practices, they changed their slide number 1, but I still let people know. because you know what the strategies of restorative practice when they had it on the first slide? Strategies to build strong, healthy relationships. So it's teaching everybody to how to explicitly build strong relationships that people like you and me are naturally good at.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's giving them a strategy to do the stuff that some people do naturally.
You know, it's a really good example of you saying, like, building relationships. You know, it's been pretty intimidating with these cameras, with people, like, who I've been interviewing, and they're like, I don't know if I want to do this, you know, and then all of a sudden we get into that conversation, and it's like, you know, and it's like, hey, I got you, you know,
exactly.
we're on the same page, you know, it's cool, man. I mean, that's why I love doing this, is because humans are so interesting. People are so interesting, and behavior is a form of communication.
Right.
We communicate because we need to, you know, and we need to express something.
Yep.
I just, you know.
Again, the restorative practice, from an academic standpoint, is a science of relationship and connections.
Yeah.
It's about community and how we need it. And in our generations, as generations has moved to the digital and stage, we're more disconnected than ever. So this is a way to intentionally get connected. You want to connect your classroom, you want to connect your community. Some of the works that's done around the country, like Detroit, they're working on a restoring Detroit City.
Yeah.
So they've gotten all of their police officers, all of their community organizations, churches, businesses. The goal is to have all of them trained in restorative practices.
Well, that's the most important part to, you know, place to start. I mean, they're okay, and not even just like them doing restorative practices on civilians, but with themselves.
Exactly, it starts with you.
And I talked about this with someone else today, that the teachers need to be understanding of their mental health.
Yes.
And, you know, I mean, it's just an overall awareness.
It is.
That is just such a necessity.
The first people we need to be restorative with is ourselves. We need
to. And because if you're not restorative with yourself, you can't go be restorative with anybody else.
Thank you.
It's you know, you got to work on you, you know. And it's like, I know it's cliche, but you are number one, because when you put yourself as number two, that number one is going to be treated really well to begin with, and they're going to notice you deteriorate.
Exactly.
So you can't, you know. Kevin, I'm just like I'm just so excited that you're here, man. I love this, dude. I'm gonna pick up this book.
Yeah, go to their website too. And one thing, the next thing I'm gonna give you, this is a talking piece.
I thought you were stressed out the whole time. I'm like, my man, you know, like, I got you.
But look at what it's. The reason that's the symbol of IRP, because their goal is to restore the world. I mean, it is a goal. Ted Wattell, the founder of IRP, he just started a new company. He's trying to get work with politicians. It's called Building a New Reality, trying to work with governance, restorative governance.
Yeah.
So, you just plant seeds and you just keep moving, take the long view, and do
this
the work.
is a big seed here, man.
Do for your professional development for yourself, because there's a lot of stuff you can learn on your own. You can get into the formal trainings at some point, but go to their website. You'll see a lot of research information, videos, so much information that you can use. So
just like that, dude. It's 40 minutes, bro.
Yeah.
I do want to sit here and keep going at it, but I do have to wrap it up.
Okay.
So how has, you know, you going around and talking to people, how are you able to see your results? Like, how are you able to, like, you're going to leave here.
Yeah.
And you won't know the data of what you've done. You know, you just spread your word, you spread your seed, you planted it, and you're like, hope it grows. I don't know if I'm going to be able to ever, you know, you look at me as a seed. You won't know if I'm going to be a tree or if I'm going to be a weed.
Right.
You know, how do you find that satisfaction in your new, because you had that instant when you were working one-to-one with kids. Okay. Yeah,
but even sometimes with kids, you know, you work with them young, and sometimes you don't see the impact till later. The one thing I will say is a couple things. With the coaching model, I do go back to some of the places. But when I go now, I always give people my Twitter to follow me, not because I do say a lot of cool stuff, but I get stuff from people from all over the world.
Yeah.
And I retweet it and I share it out. And there are a lot of people who reach out and tell me some of the stuff that they're doing, and I get to see their work on Twitter.
What is your Twitter?
It is at Rask Jones, at RASK Jones, Regional Alternative School K Jones. So at Rask Jones. But it is just
I'll
a lot of...
provide it below the...
Yeah, just a lot of resources. And
check them out.
Yeah, and people from all over the world who are doing phenomenal stuff. I mean, people who are doing... Like, the one friend of mine, she's a professor. She lives in Hungary. She's been doing restorative justice at the Hungary border with conflict that's been going on since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And she's done documentaries about it. She hasn't had a lot of success, but she's still at it. You know, you plant the seed and
but think about that in the other way, though, that, like, even though if you're not seeing success, maybe you're seeing a maintenance.
Exactly.
And just like a kind of a, which is kind of keeping your head above water, which is as much as you can do. You know, you're doing all that you can.
One thing I always do when I go to these communities, because when I go there, I feel so connected to them. It feels like they're going to be my best friend.
Yeah.
But then I just start being transparent and honest and reflective. You know, there's a few people we keep in contact, but for the most part, and I always say, when I check out the end of the training circle, I say it's been really nice being a temporary part of your community, because I know I'm a temporary part of their community.
Yeah.
Important, they impact me. I get so much energy from it. And some, I get to see some samples of good stuff, but I know I'm going to give them everything I got when I'm in front of them, and that's what matters to me. So.
Kevin Jones, ladies and gentlemen, I feel like you came out of the heavens, man. Talk to me. It was awesome, dude. I'm freaking jacked up. That was so cool. Kevin Jones, you can follow him on Twitter at RasJones. I'm going to be getting your contact information after this. I want to, and I'll also let you know when this comes out. So thank you, everybody, for listening here on Restorative Practices. Do you got anything you want to plug in or say to...
The only thing I'll say is, from a person who's been trained in every letter or initiative there is, the one thing I'll say about restorative practices, I didn't have to get rid of any of my learning. It just made it better. It gave me a place to put all the stuff, the good things that I would say that I've learned over my years. It gave me a place to put it, and that framework is awesome. So,
cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you. We're here at ICEC, and Mr. Jones here, Kevin Jones, was able to give his presentation today, and he was kind enough to come and hang out with me and follow up on this more. So I appreciate it. Kevin, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.